Travelers, what's a destination that looked amazing online but was completely disappointing in person? Giza, Egypt. Absolutely horrible. Every single person there is corrupt. Every customs officer, tour guide, police, hotel clerk, etc. The pyramids are crowded with tourists and are extremely underwhelming. You can literally see a McDonald's just a mile away. I'm so glad we were only there for 2 days and breathed a sigh of relief once we left. Oh, and if you're a woman, it's 10 times as bad. You will be groped, hit on, propositioned, all the time. Next story. Hollywood Boulevard in LA, especially the Walk of Fame. It seems so glamorous in movies and photos, but up close it's crowded, gritty, and full of pushy vendors and costumed characters. Interesting to see once, but definitely not like the postcard version. Next story. Egypt in general. The only country I wanted to leave after spending 1 day there. People are trying to scam you all the time. They're super disrespectful with women. Just don't go. The history of the place is amazing, but everything else is just plain wrong. Crappy destination for sure. Next story. Aruba, a nice little sunny island that is ruined, and I do mean ruined, by the ridiculous amount of people trying to hawk you a timeshare. When we checked into our hotel, the receptionist invited us to a timeshare presentation. Once we got to our bedroom, our phone rang again. It was an invitation to a timeshare presentation. We went into town. There's people on every street corner stopping you, trying to sell you a timeshare. Got back to our hotel around 9 p.m. Oh, look, someone's at the door, trying to sell you a timeshare. Go into a local restaurant for lunch, and the waiter pitches us a timeshare. The thing I found really nasty and quite intimidating, to be honest, was that a lot of the people on street corners would try and force you into a waiting vehicle, so you could be whisked off somewhere to spend several hours having a timeshare presentation directed at you. Oh, yes, and when we returned home a week or two later, we got an information pack in the post from the hotel trying to sell us a timeshare. It's a lovely place, but we found the constant pitching of timeshares completely ruined our experience. Next story. Kissing the Blarney Stone is wildly overhyped. Not only do you wait in long lines and dangle awkwardly over a castle ledge, but you also press your lips to a filthy bacteria-covered slab that's been kissed by thousands of strangers every day. Next story. Dubai. Some of it wasn't bad, but that was further away from the city. In the city, people could be so horrible to workers and animals. The outskirts were depressing and dirty, and it just felt unglamorous and very touristy. I've been more than once, and it seems to get worse each time. Next story. Zanzibar. It's beautiful, but horrendous and bitterly disappointing. The whole island has been ravaged by conglomerates making all-inclusive resorts and utterly destroying the fabric of society by making everyone so painfully dependent on tourism and catering to this imagined idea of what Zanzibar is. Next story. Oktoberfest, or more specifically Munich. Now, I'm not saying you won't have a good time, it's just if you want to go to a place like your state fairgrounds, if you will, dressed in expensive diamonds with a million other Americans singing Sweet Caroline, and expensive chicken or schnitzel getting crap-faced with hefty beers under a large tent with an Oompa band and spending a ton on an hour-long wait to ride the Ferris wheel, hey, go right ahead. However, you'll get a more authentic experience going to a small-town Volkfest, where it's less crowded, you can meet local Germans, and spend half as much for a chicken, beer, and all the Ein Prosit, Sweet Caroline, Country Roads, and the Robbie Williams song Angels. They all love to sing when they're drunk. At half the price, and less crowded, it's way more fun. Ein Prosit? I can't be saying that right. Ein Prosit? The doctor. I hate you, Dempsey. Next story. Cairo. I've been to 50 countries and always found something I love and enjoy, but Cairo, yeesh, sucked. Mostly because the people were just the worst. Go to Oman instead. A wonderful place and the people were lovely. Next story. Sanya, China. China's Hawaii. Yeah, okay. The city itself is dirty even by developing country standards. But it's also very expensive, even much more so than Shanghai or Beijing, kinda like Hawaii. Most beaches are not very clean either. The ones at the resorts are nice and clean, but you aren't allowed to swim at those beaches. Mostly just for pictures, I guess. Not only would it be cheaper to go to any Southeast Asian country, but the beaches would be much better as well. Saying this as someone living in China. Next story. Vietnam. This is part of my heritage and a family hometown. It has been what feels like completely commodified for tourism's sake. Not what I remember from even 20 years ago. I get bringing in business is a thing, but the way folks have gone about it have just made it completely gaudy beach resorts and not exactly what they're charging these days. Next story. Many of the places listed here were awesome 20 years ago. Mass tourism, especially cruise ships, have ruined them. My unpopular answer, Yellowstone. We went in September, and it was still a mass of people, which I could deal with, except they exhibited the worst behavior, chasing the wildlife, driving erratically, standing on the edge of the boiling water pits. I can't remember what they're called, but I found myself hoping some of these people would just fall in. Next story. Marrakesh, Morocco. We stayed in the Medina, and that was probably our first mistake. As soon as we opened the door of our riad, we were constantly ambushed by people aggressively trying to sell you things or scam you. People would follow you around for ages trying to sell you things you didn't want, and they weren't shy about grabbing you and trying to pull you in whatever direction. Add to that the people that would give you directions, but expecting you to pay them for their help that you never even asked for. We were there as 4 girls, and I guess we kinda expected the men to be inappropriate and touchy, but we weren't really prepared for how grabby and pushy they were. The son of the riad owner had to start coming out with us every single time we wanted to leave because it was getting bad, and this one guy tried to fight his way into the riad to get to my friend. To be fair, when the police were around and saw things, they would chase the men away regardless of what they were doing. But of course, they can't be everywhere all the time. Add to that the locals would call us the N-word a fair bit, and we all ended up with food poisoning despite being super careful, and all of us having African and Asian backgrounds. I probably would not return there. Next story. Not what people traditionally think as a destination, but that's part of the shame as it really is the destination. I'm talking about cruise ships. The real you in with bait and switch prices and a promise to visit so many ports of call, but the price is listed as per person per day, and lacking in all the nickel and diming they will do. The time in port is so ridiculously short that you can't really enjoy the location before it's time to race back to the ship so they don't leave you. If you're not going on a cruise with the idea that the boat itself is the destination, you're making a mistake. Now I could go on, including the horrific labor practices and such, but that's enough. My wife has dragged me on 2 now. I'm not a big fan. Next story. Istanbul. I'd always wanted to go and see the historical buildings and take in the culture. History, however, has been completely erased from a large number of buildings, including the Hagia Sophia, which was incredibly disappointing. People were, at best, dismissive and mostly really effing rude, which is at odds to all the Turks I know in England who are mega friendly. Next story. I'd like to give a bit of a different answer to this question. I was trying to think of a destination, and I was completely disappointed in and couldn't come up with one. I do have one I used to feel this way about, but my perspective has totally changed. If you asked me 10 years ago, my answer would have been Memphis. I had just come back from my first trip to New Orleans and was really missing the city. I had plans to visit a friend in Tennessee, and everyone told me to stop in Memphis because it's so similar to New Orleans. I was very disappointed because it felt nothing like New Orleans and also felt a bit unsafe at the time. I did visit the Civil Rights Museum and Sun Studios, which were highlights of the trip, but as for this city, I felt I never had to go back there again. Fast forward to last year. I had to go down to Memphis for a work trip, and honestly, I had an absolute blast. Taking Memphis for what it is, its own city, and not comparing it to another trip I absolutely loved. It was amazing. The food was amazing. Highly recommend a food tour, by the way. And I got to learn a lot about the history of the city from the food tour alone. Then, of course, you have the music, the people, and this awesome funky vibe I haven't found anywhere else. I know the crime rates are still high, but just like anywhere, be aware of your surroundings and don't be reckless and you'll be fine. I'd totally return to Memphis again. I think the lesson here is to manage expectations while visiting somewhere new and embrace the local for what it actually is, and not what you expected it to be. Next story. Goa, India. The streets are covered in cow dung. Taxis massively overcharged, and they've got deals with local hotels and restaurants, so they're basically your only option unless you want to rent a scooter. Locals weren't very welcoming either. Market vendors were super aggressive and kept following me around for like 10 to 15 minutes, even after I kept saying no. The scams don't stop with taxis either. At one point, a guy trailed me trying to clean my ears with sharp metal tools. Even though we stayed at a 5-star hotel and only ate there, I still ended up horribly sick, lost 15 pounds in 3 days, and when the doctors and nurses finally showed up, they came barefoot in flip-flops and didn't even wear gloves. Next story. Pisa, Italy. Don't get me wrong, the area around the Leaning Tower is beautiful and worth the visit, but the town itself is very disappointing and a dump. We traveled from Florence by train to Pisa, left our luggage at the station and walked through the town to the Leaning Tower. The walk was through the town and through a dodgy area near the station, and the town was so out of context with the area where the tower is. Tried to find a decent restaurant and failed, quickly got to the train at the airport. Sad. Next story. I lived in Rome. I think it's an amazing place to visit and a great place to live, as long as you know what to expect. I say this with no disrespect to Italians. Many people who moved to Rome had a hard time because their expectations were pretty different. This doesn't apply to people visiting for a short period of time, but for those considering moving there, the expectation is often European lifestyle with a pizza and pasta. Clean, well-functioning institutions, order, and precision like Germany. In my experience, the reality is more Mediterranean lifestyle. Look at other Mediterranean cultures like Greece, North Africa, coastal Spain, Turkey. They're often a bit more laid back. Rules are often more like guidelines. The running of daily life can be more chaotic. It's wonderful once you accept that you're not in Austria or Sweden. The further south you go, the more this seems true. In Rome, you'll see SPQR all around. There's a joke that it stands for Sono pazzi questi Romani, which translates to They're crazy, these Romans. Next story. Mount Rushmore. It is underwhelming, way smaller than you would think when you look at all the pictures of it. You can see what the mountain would have looked like without the carvings, and I just wish they would have left it alone. The rest of the area was great. Devil's Tower isn't that far away, and again, way smaller than what the movies make it out to be. But still, crazy how those volcanic pillars just rise out of the ground and make the tower. Next story. Gatlinburg. Beautiful mountains, but entirely too crowded. Horrible parking. The shops are mostly old, outdated, and boring. Even taking a drive through the park usually sucks because you constantly are tailgated by people in a rush for whatever reason. Or you end up behind a pack of geezers on Harleys that scare off any wildlife from the engine noise. Won't be back. Next story. Key West, no doubt. Ugly, crowded, drug and crime-filled city on an island. Worse than that, inescapable third-rate acoustic guitar-playing Jimmy Buffet wannabes in every crappy bar serving the crappiest drinks that were ever crapped out of anywhere ever. Wasting away again in Margaritaville. Is that how that goes? I haven't heard that in a minute. Next story. People complaining about cities like New York and Rome being crowded and dirty are clowns. Some people like a big city, and the hustle and bustle is part of the allure. Go camping if you don't like a city vibe. Next story. Broadway, Nashville. Incredibly tacky, incredibly touristy. Awful music in almost every bar. Bouncers trying to convince you to come into their boring bar instead of the others. There's no good food. It's like the French Quarter with bad cover bands and no culture. Next story. Morocco is like 5 big cities that are designed to funnel you through those tourist malls. The history feels made up. And as if everyone is role-playing a made-up Aladdin past. Everyone presses your boundaries and is very good at demanding your attention. If you try to deny or ignore people for the sake of not buying anything, they will try to stress you out, be rude to you. The prices are intentionally not listed in areas, so you have to attempt to bargain to get a reasonable price with every purchase. My girlfriend would also get swarmed if she walked 20 feet ahead of me and appeared alone. Next story. Honolulu, Hawaii. The people were rude and pushy. I tripped and fell on pavement and everyone just ignored me. The only places people were nice and were tourist sites because the other tourists were nice. We were on a tour bus and the bus driver explained the difference between being a native and an islander. Then we got to listen to him complain about being an islander. Next story. Forks, Washington. And I say this with total respect since I was born and raised in Washington. However, people going there are expecting to see vampires and werewolves. they'll be bitterly disappointed. It's just a very small, isolated town in a very cold and wet location, whose economy is tied to a dying forest products industry, with the remaining population eking out a living from a short-lived teen horror movie series. Next story. Pretty much everything. Yeah, speaking from my own perspective as a flight attendant in the 90s, when layovers were a week long in the airline I worked with, wherever you go, there is this picture perfect in your mind, and then the reality hits. Of course, there are beautiful places in this world, but they are nature. You don't have to travel far to be in nature. Next story. St. Petersburg, Russia. Booked a Baltic cruise mainly for this stop, and it was the worst. I loved every city except St. Petersburg. Some really amazing historic buildings, but the rest of the city was trash and the people were miserable. I went in July and dealt with 50-degree weather, heavy winds, and downpours. Our tour guide was great, but I'm sure she's been arrested by Putin for talking poorly of him and the country throughout our tour. Next story. As far as US sites go, Garden of the Gods is overrun by tourists. Horseshoe Bend is nothing more than a photo op, and the biggest disappointment was Antelope Canyon. Antelope would be beautiful if no one was there. It's basically an Instagram photo shoot with massive crowds. Despite being disappointing, all of the above have redeemable qualities, while Mount Rushmore has none. Do not go there. Next story. I know I'm going to be an outliner in this, but I will say it. New Zealand. Don't get me wrong, the country is stunning and the nature is beautiful, but it's expensive, which explains why so many Kiwis are moving to Australia. And the amount of racism I've experienced or witnessed there is something I've never experienced before in my life. I'm not the only black person who mentioned this, but usually when someone does bring it up, they're met with hostility and accused of lying. I made a video about my experience on TikTok a year ago, and to this day, I still get occasional DMs from angry Kiwis saying all kinds of racist things to me. It is a beautiful country with one of the most breathtaking nature runs, and I did run into kind souls there, but I would never step foot in that country ever again. Next story. To be honest, most tourist islands, Bali, Aruba, etc., just massive tourism, litter, and overconsumption are killing all the island beauty, the wildlife, peace and quiet, and the entire ecosystems, really. Also, the increasing crime rate, the street harassment you face from economies being too dependent on only tourism to function. My friend felt the same way about Jamaica. It seems to be the chill vibe of island culture, and peaceful retreats are history. Next story. India. Sorry, but you see images of the Taj Mahal, Jaipur, the Punjab, images of farmers working their fields as you pass by in a train with sitar music playing in your head. And then you get there. The abject poverty, heat, humidity, garbage everywhere, emaciated women thrusting their even more emaciated babies in your arms. It's very, very hard to watch and see. Second to that would be Jamaica. Unfortunately, the crime there and the gang violence have really done damage to the country. You go to these walled resorts to stuff yourself and basically see nothing of the country. Next story. Mar-a-Lago. Putrid restrooms stuffed with boxes of top-secret government files, Trump turd rings, and dirty napkins. And apparently the grass has exceeded its life, per expert Trump comments. A real crapple. Next story. Tunisia, Mahdia. We came here with our 2 young boys. En route to the hotel on our coach, it was close to midnight and had the window seat. Men stood on the roadside, swearing at us through the window in rude gestures the entire 3-hour journey. That was not our best start. Scared me. Inside the hotel, we were treated with respect and couldn't have wished for a better hotel. As soon as we left to enter the aqua park, everything changed. The aqua park is attached to the hotel, but also open to the public. We were regularly shoved out of the way when queuing for rides, pointed at, and we could make out the words tourists. While in the wave pool, a grown woman pushed herself up against my son multiple times while looking towards her group. My partner moved him out of her way, and she made advances towards him again, and this time grabbed his face. Just really strange and concerning behavior, so we got out. My partner took his son on the slides, whilst I took my boy in the lazy river. Teenage boys started touching me, stroking my inner thighs. At first I thought it's crowded, maybe this was done by mistake. But then I clocked they were communicating with each other and dropping back behind me and my son so they could touch me again. Then I stood up and explained to my son, "We're getting out." When I tried to get out, the boy was in front of me, grabbed me, and began fondling my chest. I screamed. The lifeguard slapped him and they contacted the police. However, this experience was enough to put us off ever going back to the aquapark. Outside the hotel, there was litter everywhere. It smelled quite bad, too. We decided to stay at our beach and just reside inside the hotel. Next story. The Statue of Liberty, New York. It looks iconic. It looks impressive. In print, in films, and everything. But in person, it's a smallish metal statue with a great big plinth. Well, that was nice. What's next? Next story. Marrakesh for me. It honestly looked like a place worth visiting, but it was just a horrible experience all around for us. Now, why MMV, and I'm sure some people have a great time, and truth be told, there were some nice moments. However, the online description is Marrakesh Medina is a vibrant and fascinating maze full of colors, scents, and history. Well, I don't know. I found it fairly bland in colors, incredibly dirty, and it stinked, and people were catcalling and scamming constantly. That said, it wasn't all bad. The YSL house was nice. The visiting Camp Tuadama was a pretty cool experience. Best part of the trip, however, was the flight ride home. Is that Camp Tuadama? Guys, I wish I knew how to read. I apologize. I'm Googling. I'm still not really getting it. Next story. Nashville, the heart of music, tourist shops, and bars. Not really southern. Everyone you meet there is mostly from out of state and they just move there. You don't get this warm southern hospitality or the real country vibe. Just hustle and bustle city. Super disappointing. Next story. Vegas. Naive me thought it was like the movies. Bright and fun and hot but beautiful. Pool parties with everyone drinking and laughing. No, it was hotter than hell. Every person on the street is trying to sell you something or take a picture with you so you can pay them. Practically naked men and women everywhere. Tourists and the vendors, and I guess that part was just like the movies. But the pools were packed to the point you couldn't move, and every single pool had beer and cigarettes floating in it. The water just looked filthy. The casinos all smelled like cigarettes or weed, and the nightclubs were so expensive and packed it was painful to even go. The best thing we did was leave the strip and go to Red Rock Canyon and some museums. Ended up just hanging by my friend's pool about 40 minutes away from the strip for 3 days. There, had a blast. Like I said, I'm naive. I didn't realize this is how Vegas really is. I know it's someone's cup of tea, but sure isn't mine. I thought I'd have fun and be able to let loose, but the whole trip felt like such a dangerous situation. Shame, because I really wanted to love it. Lots of exclamation points, lots of all caps there. Hopefully I'm doing that writer justice. Really want to capture that disappointment. Next story. Guam. My now wife and I traveled there from Japan about 10 years ago. I wouldn't have ever said it looked amazing, but I am not a beach-going person. We did beaches, of course, but they were underwhelming. It was fine, but the overall feeling was American suburbia plopped down on a tropical island. We should have just gone to Okinawa. Nicest, most organized U.S. immigration officials I have ever encountered, though. Next story. India. I've been to so many places. I've been wowed. I've been bummed. India, for sure, is at the bottom of my list. I've never seen such a disappointing divide between the rich and the poor and how that nation is just so okay with that. Literally, you don't see it in photos, but just on the opposite side of that hedge at the Taj Mahal is the largest impoverished city you'll ever see in your life. And they hide that so you're only focused on the massive, ornate structure for one person. Next story. The Blue Lagoon in Iceland. It's a completely man-made tourist trap, and the water was anything but pure. Off in a corner of the lagoon, I reached down to grab what I expected to be a handful of pristine sand, and instead pulled up a mushy, putrid handful of accumulated human hair. Another person in our party had the skin around their eyes suddenly become highly inflamed, and apparently it was a common enough occurrence that the staff had some first aid remedy on hand to reduce the inflammation. Never again. Next story. Rio. Mostly for crime and trash. I've been there a few times, only robbed once, walking from Copacabana to Ipanema. But my friend got robbed on a bus by a guy working with the driver and fare taker. Another got robbed by a gang at the Christ Redeemer statue, and they took his money and shoes when they found out he didn't have a phone. But also, if you're not at Copacabana, Ipanema, Barra, or Leblon, there is trash on the beaches or polluted water. Also, if you go in the middle of the summer, that humidity is a beast. Next story. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. It's the holiest place in Christendom. But when I went there a decade ago, it was dark and depressing and full of nuns with sharp elbows. Every significant site has 6 variations of the same thing, like 6 pendant lamps, because there's a millennium-old fight about who should control it. The last 3 stations of the cross were up some steep stairs, and there's a police-type barrier in front of it. Plus, a priest was clapping at people to leave after they'd knelt for like a few seconds. Now, I don't bat for any religious teams, so I was more bemused than disappointed, but St. Peter's in Rome kicks this church's butt to heaven and back. Next story. Belize, the best island in San Pedro, and it's nothing but a shanty town with a bunch of people living in poverty while rich white guys drive around drunk in their golf carts. The beaches are not nice. The water is full of grossness, and I came home with both arms tore up from swimming around the secret beach. It was disgusting. Literally dead crabs and poop floating in the water. We did not get in. My wife's family lives there. Her uncle moved there in the 80s to escape taxes or something. Nobody knows. Next story. Cairo and Luxor. Locals won't leave me alone, even if I said no. One time I asked for directions and he asked for a tip. A stranger forced me to buy his used toilet paper, followed me and harassed me, and left only after a good Samaritan stepped in. Someone offered to take pictures of us in front of the Sphinx, and he forced us to pay him 100 EGP per person. I gave money to a beggar, and out of nowhere a swarm of beggars surrounded our car, demanded we give them money too. They take that tipping custom to the next level. Next story. Grenada. Their coral reefs are completely destroyed and covered in sewage. The highly publicized beaches and coral reefs are just lies. And, oh yeah, they're essentially a military state since the US invasion. So expect machine guns and a nice groping at the airport. Could not leave fast enough. And you couldn't pay me to go back. Next story. Turkey. Yeah, I got a good deal on tickets and a hotel. When I went, the exchange rate was so good it felt like I was robbing them. Everything was cheap. The taxis, food, souvenirs, rentals, and events, they're all like a quarter of what it would cost to do where I live. And this was in Istanbul. And when I went to Ankara, it was even cheaper. Sadly, though all of the above were trash quality. The taxi smelled like it doubled as a toilet. The drivers went out of their way to be rude. Also, if you go, make sure you have Google Maps running so they don't take you the long way around. The food was atrocious. It was all lean and overcooked beef, stewed veggies, dry chicken. This is excluding desserts and pastries, which is the only thing people would recommend. The kebabs were all leathery mystery meat or overcooked beef with a side of 2-day-old salad. The souvenirs were all made in China and looked so tacky and cheap, and every event I went to, I felt like I was being rushed to the end of it. Also, street scammers with birds, snakes, bracelets are very common. Then there's the people. They were rude, like clicking tongues, exasperated sighs as soon as they figure out you're a tourist. And I don't think please and thank you exists in the Turkish language. It honestly felt like they all hated their lives. All in all, would not recommend going for a city tour trip. If you must go, then go to a private beach resort and just eat desserts and pastries the entire trip around. Well, that concludes our stories of, disappointing traveling. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I've only left the country once. I went to Canada, thought it was very beautiful, thought the people were nice. So I haven't had any bad experiences, and I'm curious if you guys have been to any of these places, and if you have felt similar, you felt the same, or maybe these people are completely full of it. I have no idea, who's to say, but if you have any fun stories that you would like to share, please feel free to drop them down below, because I'm always interested in mispronouncing everything that I read. But thanks for hanging out with me, and we will see you in the next one.